Mr. Feinstein, I thank you very much for joining me. I want to understand from you just why Israel has taken the specific stand that it has on this issue. That South Africa, sorry, has taken the stand it has on this issue. You're on mute, Mr. Feinstein. You're on mute.
My apologies.
Yes.
Thank you very much for the invitation. It's very good to be with you. The reason South Africa in particular has undertaken this filing in the International Court of Justice, which is probably the highest court on the planet, dealing with what we describe as the crime of crimes, genocide, is because South Africa, of course, has a very specific history. South Africa emerged from hundreds of years of racist oppression, what was called apartheid or separateness. And during that struggle against racist oppression was very closely aligned with the struggle of the Palestinian people. The organization that I served in Parliament, the African National Congress of Nelson Mandela, had a very close relationship with the Palestinian Liberation Organization and with the Palestinian struggle in broad terms. So that would be the first and obvious reason. But there are other reasons as well. I think because South Africa has managed to overcome that history of racism and has managed to function not without its challenges, but has managed to function as a non-racial, even anti-racist state since we became a democracy in 1994, I think it does feel a moral responsibility in the world more broadly on issues of racist oppression, or in the case of Israel and Palestine, not just apartheid within Israel as a nation state, but also a brutal and illegal occupation of the Palestinian territories that we are seeing in perhaps its most extreme manifestation in Gaza. In addition to that, I should just mention very briefly that there was a very close relationship between the Israeli state and the apartheid South African state before 1994. So Israel was absolutely crucial in providing weaponry, military training, and even helping apartheid South Africa to become a nuclear power.
Mr. Feinstein, can I just stop you for a moment? Because when you say that ANC has had strong ties with the Palestinian people and its struggles, the fact is, when you go to the ICJ and make genocide charges against the Israelis, there will be those who will turn around and say, look, forget your old ties. We are dealing with Hamas now, a terrorist organization that has killed over 100 innocent Israelis, an organization that still holds dozens of innocent people hostage. South Africa, if it wants to take a moral stand, must also speak more strongly about Hamas and the fact that this is a terror organization. Else you lose the principled moral high ground that South Africa wants to take at the moment.
Well, if you read South Africa's 84-page submission to the International Court of Justice, you will see the starting point of that submission is a total condemnation of the attack by Hamas on Israel and the killing not of over 100, but of over 1,000 Israelis, and the taking of hostage of others. However, you can't see that as an isolated, unprovoked incident as it's been described, because the reality is that Palestinians, and Gaza in particular, have been living under 70 years of illegal and very brutal occupation and oppression. Israel has been murdering people in Gaza and the West Bank throughout most of those 70 years, in numbers even higher than Hamas killed in Israel.
But to call it genocide, but to call it, but in a warlike, no, 1 minute, Mr. Feinstein, in a warlike situation where you've got two sides who are in a war, how do you then turn around and say it's genocide and one side is the villain and the other side is heroic?
Well, because genocide has a very specific definition. And unfortunately, you couldn't describe what Hamas did in Israel, awful, appalling, and tragic as it was. It doesn't fit the Genocide Convention. They're not committing a genocide against the Israeli people. However, it is arguable in international law that what Israel is doing in Gaza is actually a genocide, which is an attempt to blame an entire people for the actions of certain political and or military actors from its community. So, Are you telling me that the average of 117 babies that are being killed a day by the Israeli assault on Gaza are members of Hamas, are supporters of Hamas, or that because over 1,000 Israelis were killed, which is appalling and unacceptable and indefensible, even from an organization whose residents, they argue, are being occupied, which I would agree they are being. If you say that those 1,000 deaths make it absolutely legitimate for Israel to slaughter, as of 2 days ago, over 23,000 residents of Gaza, 217 people a day, 48 of whom are women, 117 of whom are children. And you're saying to me, yeah, that's fine. That's what war is about. That's not what war is about, because war is between nation states. And unfortunately, the people of Gaza are not a nation state. They're only legally occupied people. And that is why South Africa has argued there is a genocide being committed by Israel that doesn't in any way excuse the actions of Hamas, which is a political operative. Hamas does not represent all the people of Gaza. It does not represent all the people of the occupied Palestinian territories. And the way in which the Genocide Convention works is that a state, a signatory state, can take another signatory state to the court, the ICJ, if it believes that other state is either committing genocide or is failing to prevent genocide.
I take your point, Mr. Feinstein. You're saying there cannot be an equivalence, therefore, between what happened on October 7th and what has followed. I want to ask you, though, this. The international community hasn't sided with South Africa, whether it's Britain, whether it's the United States, whether it's India, which, again, like your country, also faced a long period of colonialism where you had Mahatma Gandhi, who spoke of non-violence, and the Mandela. No, just a minute.
You're factually incorrect. No, let me tell you why. Let me tell you why. The world hasn't not sided with South Africa. The Western world, yes. And some of the close allies of what I would describe as ethno-nationalist projects, which is what you were discussing with your previous guests in another form, haven't sided with South Africa. But many, many, many countries have sided with South Africa. Many of them have actually sided with South Africa as participants in the court, and many others have sided with South Africa, showing massive diplomatic support. So you're talking about certain sections of the world. There are other sections of the world that have sided with South Africa.
Are you disappointed, therefore, with India? Are you disappointed with what that India has not sided with South Africa on this?
Of course I am. India used to be a close ally of the African National Congress. And unfortunately, since its current prime minister has been in office, it has taken some positions that I would not describe as anti-racist. It has taken some positions that I think are part of a more global ethno-nationalist project. And that's one of the reasons why you were having your previous discussion about the way in which religion has been insinuated into all aspects of political life in India. And the sort of politics that are practiced in India today are certainly not the sort of politics that are practiced by the African National Congress or were practiced by the Congress movement in India, who were in an alliance with the ANC.
With due regard, Mr. Feinstein, the African National Congress today faces other charges, corruption and other charges. But I will ask you, I will ask you one. I just have a minute. I have one final question. Is what happens? Do you really believe an ICJ hearing, ruling, which is not binding or not enforceable on a country, certainly not enforceable, will change what's happening on the ground?
Yes, because what will probably happen is if the ICJ, and what South Africa have asked for are interim measures, and if the ICJ decides that there are certain interim measures that Israel takes, it is highly likely that Israel will ignore those. But where it will have an impact is on politicians like Joe Biden, Rishi Sunak, Keir Starmer, Chancellor Scholz in Germany, who are giving Israel their uncritical support and are in fact complicit in the genocide that is taking place in Gaza, because they are not only providing the political and diplomatic cover, they are providing a huge percentage of the weapons that are being used to kill innocent Palestinians on the ground.
Mr. Feinstein.
And I think it's going to make it much more difficult for them to sustain that position in the face of significant opposition from their own voters in their own countries.
Mr. Feinstein, strong words by you out there. I have 30 seconds because there is one issue that I still want to raise. A South African under-19 captain, because he's a Jew, has been removed, David Teager. Do you approve of that? Is that not also cowardice in a way because there will be protesters? He's been removed. Just 30 seconds.
Okay, so there are two things. First of all, South Africa has huge problems currently, mainly corruption. And I actually resigned from Parliament in protest because my committee was not allowed to pursue an inquiry into a massive case of corruption against my own party. Secondly, the case of this poor young guy who somebody got to say when he accepted an award that he fully supports the courageous Israeli soldiers on the ground in Gaza has unfortunately been a cause of massive division in South Africa, because there are many people who are not supportive of what Israel is doing in Gaza in South Africa. In fact, I would argue
should he have been removed? Should he have been removed in your view?
Sorry?
Should he have been removed in your view? Should he have been removed as South Africa's captain?
Specific circumstances of whether he remaining as captain, because he remains a part of the team for the Under-19 World Cup, whether his remaining as captain, which the South African Cricket Association has argued would create a security risk for him and his teammates, whether in fact that was the case or not. I think it's unfortunate that this has happened. I think it's equally unfortunate that this young man made those statements and now has this enormous political pressure on his shoulders as he goes into a World Cup.
Let me leave it there, Mr. Feinstein. You've been combative and you've spoken your mind out, but I appreciate that. That's the spirit which we want in our program, to hear different perspectives. So thank you very much for joining me there.
Thank you for the invitation. All the best.